I wanted to know about your relationship with the Toxic Avenger. It's obviously been around for decades now, thanks to Lloyd Kaufman and Trauma Entertainment. And I mean, after the first movie, there were sequels, but there were also like comics, video games, all that stuff.
For
What
sure.
kind of, when did you first watch the Toxic Avenger, and what kind of stuck out to you about that movie as like, whoa, this is this is something special that I kind of want to work on at some point in the future?
Well, it's interesting that you phrase it like that, and I'll tell you, sixth grade, my buddy Andy's older brother, who was sort of like this metalhead, and he was the one that showed us all the cool stuff. He was like, "You got to watch this movie," and we checked it out, and we were howling with laughter. It was so unhinged and ridiculous, and like I think we knew that it was meant to be ridiculous, but it was still very powerful in that way. Um, and it also had this handmade quality to it that maybe I had seen before in other movies, but I don't remember. That was the first time I really had the feeling of like, oh, this was not a studio with famous actors and big special effects. This was just regular dudes
Yeah,
doing this. And so the sense of humor and the do-it-yourselfness were both very inspirational to my group of friends at that age. Um, when we were kind of trying to make our own movies, like we can fucking do this too. I never had the idea ever that like, oh, one day I'm going to do the Toxic Avenger. That sort of it just it's not that I wanted to or didn't want to. It just didn't seem like a possibility. It was just sort of like, okay, we've seen this, now we're trying to do our own thing. But when, many years later, I find out that they're soliciting pitches for the screenwriting job for a remake that Legendary is doing with Troma.
Mhm.
It felt like, oh, this is an opportunity to go back to those movies that I was making in sixth grade with my buddies. Like that was what was so inspiring then and sort of set me on this path to a large degree. And so there was something that felt very symmetrical about that to like maybe I could try to get this job, at least writing the script. I had no expectations it would go any further than that, but
Sure.
yeah.
Definitely sixth grade. That's kind of young. There's some stuff in that movie that's
Yeah.
that's funny. Kind of just along those lines. Like you said, Toxic Avenger is such a unique case because it is everything that is big studio like filmmaking is not. It's very low budget. It's for kind of a niche audience. Like you said, there's some stuff that happens. The scene on the bike, the kid on the bike is burned into my brain for forever.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
when you're kind of approaching that original subject matter into making a remake, what are kind of the elements and the vibes that like stick out the most that are the most important to get right in your mind for like a new version in 2025?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, the kid on the bike is one that comes up a lot, and if if we had wanted to do that, I think Legendary would have been okay with that. I just didn't have an idea for how to make it gracefully fit into the story, and I felt like if we just sort of like shoved it in there just to do it, it would feel clunky. But to me, it was the idea that like there's a certain offhanded silliness to the sense of humor, a little bit of like juvenile comedy, but also a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of violence being played for comedy in a cartoonish kind of way. And also just a feeling that this world that these characters are in has a kind of greasy, grimy sort of feel to it. And all of that together, whatever the plot is or whatever the characters are going through, it's that kind of overall bubble that they're in that I think characterizes those original movies. And that's what I wanted to bring to this one more than any kind of plot. I kind of felt like if we go back and do the exact same version of a young kid who works at a health club, um, who's getting picked on by bullies and do that exact plot again, it would really start to feel redundant and it starts to put a spotlight on the question of why are you redoing this at all?
Sure.
And so my answer to that was if we can retain the vibe of the original, but create a character that has a new, whatever, a new path, a new journey, so it feels fresh, then it can feel like a continuation of those earlier movies and not just like a, oh, we did it too, because then it's kind of like, well, why bother?
Yeah.
So that was the thinking.
No, totally. And I think you nailed it too. I think, like you said, it walks right the line of this feels like Toxic Avenger, but it's also a whole new story. So, like, you don't know what's going to happen in this version. So, so much
Right.
fun to watch.
Right. That was the hope that you would feel at home, but not like, oh, now he's gonna go out the window and fall into the, like not see it coming so
Yeah.
much.
You got a lot of surprises in this one,
Oh,
especially in the
good.
second half. Yeah. So kind of the history of this movie's release has been pretty well documented. I know it first screened at Beyond Fest in 2023, and I remember hearing all about it on Twitter from people who were there. I'm like, I can't wait to see this movie. This sounds like it's going to be totally my thing. But it was kind of a while before Cineverse picked up the distribution rights. So can you just kind of walk me through, through what was going through your head at that time? Like, do you ever think there was like a chance that people weren't going to be able to see this movie? Or did you have faith like the whole time that a distributor would come along?
Honestly, a little bit of both. Its first premiere was at Fantastic Fest in Austin, and about 2 weeks later it was at Beyond Fest in LA, and both of those screenings went really well. And so at that time I was like, oh, we're in good shape. And then as time went on, it was not getting picked up by the mainstream distributors. So of course that is nerve-wracking.
Yeah,
Because I'm like, oh yikes, what's gonna happen? Um, but I also knew that the executives there were Troma, especially Alex, the producer on the movie, was a Troma fan. So for him, it was not just like, oh, we're going to acquire this property and who cares? It doesn't matter. Like he was very passionate about it, and he was really working hard, as were all the folks over there, to find a home for it. I think there was a couple of things. The market was in a weird position, and people were not buying a lot of things that were not mainstream,
sure.
hits. Also, it's a little bit of a quirky movie, and it's not to everybody's taste. So I think people were just kind of like, I don't know if this is like a crowd pleaser. And so that was definitely I was kind of nervous there, not because I thought it would necessarily go away, but just in this day and age, you never know. There's so many things that are out of your control, and even if the legendary people are very passionate about it, they're owned by these larger corporations that control all the assets, and I don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
Um, but I did have faith because I knew the folks were working hard. And on the other side of it, I kind of feel like I'm glad that that time happened, because whatever happened in the interim that allowed Cineverse to kind of like cut the line and become the number one position to release it, is totally worth it, because they saw it and they were like, no, 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 this can be a crowd pleaser. This can be kind of like counterintuitively a mainstream movie.
Yeah,
And they've figured out a way to sort of connect with audiences and get the word out, with that idea. And so if waiting a couple of years to end up connecting with them is what you got to do, then I'm happy to do that.
sure, definitely. And Cineverse just seems like such a good fit too, because I think it
Totally.
was last year, last Christmas, when they were like making huge headlines for Terrifier 3 and
Yeah.
like blew up, and now they picked it up and it gets to be unrated, which, it's becoming a little more popular, but still it's kind of like unheard of a lot of the times. So that's like super exciting. What was that feeling when like you found it and you like they told you, yeah, it's coming out and this is happening? I'm sure that had to feel great.
I was doing backflips, absolutely, because I knew that they had just had that success with Terrifier, and they did it in a very clever way that didn't necessarily rely on. I think maybe what was giving the movie a hard time before that was the idea that, like, how are we going to sell this if we're relying on television commercials and old school movie marketing, and and connecting with people. And Cineverse comes in with all these like weird, interesting kind of like they had Toxie at the St. Patrick's Day parade.
Mhm.
Um, in Chicago, and it's like this weird little event, but it then it sort of like gets traction on social media and people are talking about it, and it ends up advertising the movie in this interesting, weird way that doesn't rely on expensive ad campaigns.
Sure.
And I found I was like, oh shit, that's very clever. And so stuff like that they're doing to kind of like boost the movie and make it seem like this crowd pleasing event is really exciting to see. And so again, that's what I mean when I'm kind of like, if you've got to wait a little while to get with the perfect partner, it's worth it because I think they're spinning something really special out of the situation.